All right, we'll be setting up a DHCP server on Linux this week also. So I'm going to go through the steps to do that. As you'll notice, I'm already root. So if you want to do this as root, you can run the command sudo-i or sudo-s to become root, or you can just use sudo for everything we need to do. We need to go to the place where the DHCP files are stored. Man, I'm having trouble typing this morning. Should get more coffee. So that's where the files are. If we look, there's already a sample dhcpd.conf file in place. If we look at that file, it basically tells us where we can find an example file. So we're going to copy that example file into the current directory and give it the name that it needs to have. And that name we want to have is dhcpd.conf. So that's the command we use to copy the sample file over. We do want to overwrite the file. And then we're going to edit that config file. We're going to edit that config file. Basically, this file defines what subnets the DHCP server works for, among other things. So there's some sample subnet declarations down here. This is one that's empty that some reason might need to exist. This is a very sparse config that doesn't really have that much stuff in it. And then we have down here another one that has some stuff in it. And then this is the one that has the more complete config that we're going to use. So let's go ahead and delete all these other ones just to get rid of them. So in Vim, you can delete lines with DD. So I'm just hitting DD a bunch of times to get rid of all these lines I don't want. And now I'm going to edit this one to work for VLAN 3. So you need to make all these changes to make this work for your VLAN 3 subnet. For range, I specify you should skip at least 10 addresses at the beginning of the subnet. So I'm going to go with, the subnet starts at 128, so I'm just going to go with 140 for my beginning range, and then I'll just go 240. So this range is enough for 100 hosts. Our domain name server at this point is going to be my server because we haven't done DNS yet. For your domain name, you should go ahead and put your internal domain name, even though we haven't configured that yet. So that's going to be rll.lab for me. Router, the VLAN 3 sub interface. For the router, the broadcast address for this subnet is going to be 1.1.255. And then the lease time, that's how long, I guess in seconds, maybe minutes, I don't know. That's how long the lease is valid, and the max lease times, that number there. So that's the VLAN 3 config. So we'll save the file. We'll start the service, and hopefully it worked. Oh, and that says it failed. So this gives us a command we can run. Status dhcpd.service. And that's not really showing us all the lines. So we're going to look at the log file instead. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a different window. I'm not root in this window, so that's why I did the sudo. Tail-F will show you the bottom of the file and keep updating the file. So I did tail-F var log messages And now I'm going to try to start the service again and see what it tells me. Bad range. 10.1.1.240, not in subnet 10.1.1.128. So yeah, so I made the range too large for our subnet, which I did on purpose so we could see how to figure out why your service didn't start. Wink, wink. So we need to actually make it something within the subnet. Our subnet ends at 191, so I'll make it 180. And then that means our broadcast address is also wrong, which should be 191. So if your service doesn't start, right, as I just demonstrated, run this command in a different window, hit some enters, and then go start the service. So it started that time. I have another VM on this network for testing. Actually, I don't think I changed the network settings for this VM, so I need to go do that. Network. We'll do network adapter 2. And it is on the NAT network. So yeah, so it's on the right network. So I can do ipconfig renew, and it should send a request. And theoretically, I should get an IP address from my DHCP server when that comes back up. Yeah, so we look, I have my settings from my DHCP server. So that's the first part of this part of the lab. You want to get it set up for VLAN 3. The second part of this part of the lab is we want to edit that file to create a scope for VLAN 2. And the way we do that is we'll copy these lines. We won't change them, we'll copy them. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines. So if you do 9 YY in Vim and go down and hit the P, that'll paste them. And then we basically want to change this to match what we have for VLAN 2, which is going to be these changes. I said skip at least 10 addresses, so I'm going to change this to 10. And then this subnet is larger, so we can make it bigger. That's not right. All right, 24-bit mask for that. Domain name server the same. Domain name's the same. We need to use the VLAN 2 sub interface. Broadcast address is going to be different. So this will create the VLAN 2 scope. So we can restart the service. So the service restarted. If the service failed to restart, you could go look at your log messages to see what the issue was and go find it and fix it. And then at this point, we need to move the PC back to VLAN 2. We also need to go make a few router config changes. At a minimum, we need to put the IP helper address on that I demonstrated in an earlier video. That basically tells the VLAN 2 sub interface that, hey, if you hear any DHCP requests, send this to this IP address. So that's how the router knows to forward that to the VLAN 3 server for DHCP. So that should work for VLAN 2. And then the last thing we're going to do is if we go down to the bottom of this file, there's a section where you can set a fixed address on a host. So in this case, here's the example. It says host Fantasia, hardware, Ethernet. You put the MAC address, and then you can give it a fixed address. So for our case, we will leave the host name Fantasia. That doesn't matter. We want to get the IP address of, the MAC address of the PC we're going to use for testing. And in that case, I'm going to use this interface. So 000C29 000C29, and then E2DB32. E2 E2, what was the rest of it? DB32. And then fixed address, put an IP address in the VLAN you're testing in. My PC is currently in the same subnet as the server, which is VLAN 3. If you're going to leave your PC in VLAN 2 to do this testing, you need to give a VLAN 2 address. So I'm going to give it 135 for VLAN 3. Restart the service, and now theoretically, if I do a release renew over here, I should get 135. Cross your fingers. Yeah, so I got 135. So that is a way you can give out what's called a reserved IP address. So basically, we're not statically setting it on the workstation, but every time this workstation comes up, it will get that same address.